Da, 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 da.
Melon. Speak friend and enter. I think it's obvious what we're going to be talking about today.
Dude, I'm sad I didn't memorize any cool catchphrases from a movie now.
The only thing I can think of is salted pork.
A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely.
All right, then.
All right.
Keep your
See,
secrets.
all right, keep them secrets.
You know, potatoes.
Boil them, mash them,
that's
stick them in a
true.
stew. Let's take the hobbits to Isengard.
Potatoes, precious.
That
What's potatoes?
that potatoes part missed my viewing today. I'm sad I missed that.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah! Yeah!
Also, well, yeah. Talking about Lord of the Rings.
Yes, if
I
that
don't
wasn't
know what
already
you're talking about.
if that wasn't already obvious from the from the memeing we just did. But yes, the Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, as well as I would say the whole entire trilogy, celebrated its 20th anniversary earlier this week. In fact, it was Sunday, December 17th. That was the
Really?
day. Yeah, marked 20 years since Return of the King came out. And so all of us being fans of these movies, me, and then if you guys want to reintroduce yourselves, it's all right. Fine then.
Jared, just introduce yourself. He's
Folks
Jared.
around him call him Strider.
Oh my god. Great, he's a live action role playing in the video.
Well,
As Samwise Gamgee.
Samwise the Brave. Say it right. I want to hear more about Sam. It's not nice to tease Mr. Frodo. I was being serious.
I was only clipping.
So was I.
I was only clipping.
Frodo wouldn't have gotten far without Sam.
That's true.
It's like they're all just best bros. So nice to see in the movie.
Dude.
In real life, too. Also, yeah. All four of those dudes.
Merry and Pippin had their own podcast for a while.
It's still going.
Oh, does it really?
Yep.
Oh, I thought it stopped.
what kind of podcast is it?
Why?
Just kind of talking
They
about
just
life.
do all sorts of random stuff.
Okay. They don't talk about just the Lord of the Rings. They just talk about
No,
whatever.
They just get on and talk about.
Just like what Rhett and Link do, kind of, in their podcasts, if you know them.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. But yeah, these movies are pretty good, I guess. Yeah.
Pretty good. They are my absolute favorite movies of all time.
Jared will not stand for such slander.
There is no slander here. Finally, we're talking about movies that Jared likes. I know, right? This is it for me. It's all downhill from here.
I'm a super huge Star Wars fan. I have my own podcast about Star Wars and everything. But the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the best set of movies that I have seen in my entire life.
All right.
My hot take is that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is better than any of the Star Wars trilogies, but all of the Star Wars trilogies are better than the Hobbit trilogy.
That's not hard to beat.
Ice cold take.
It's true.
Okay.
No, I
I
agree.
thought it was the only.
No, you're fine. I totally agree with that. It's funny to me. It's funny to me with these movies that, well, to start, they cast the perfect. I couldn't think of anybody else that I would want in the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everyone was perfect.
Everybody was perfect for their role, and even the side characters, whatever Snake Tongue guy,
Grima Wormtongue.
He's cool as the creepy, weird, spectacularly pale. Pretty sure that's makeup, but
But even if we're talking about makeup, everything is so well done in makeup and prosthetics in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Real freaking orcs. I know, and you can see the details in their armor and in their skin tone and their everything. And and you can see that in the characters as well. They get dirty as they're traveling. No one is so super pretty except for the elves, but that's supposed to be. That's intentional. But it all feels so lived in and real as you're watching it.
Yeah.
And that makes such a big difference to just draw you into this world and into the movies.
I think it also is a big deal that they filmed on location. I appreciate that for 90% of this movie, they're out in the wilderness in New Zealand.
The biggest New Zealand tourism ad of all time.
No kidding. They have Hobbiton as a thing for New Zealand. I bet you they make
They call it either the Frodo economy or the Shire economy, just because of how much tourism those movies had brought to the country.
I bet they make so much money off of just people coming to see Hobbiton that it's insane.
I bet.
It's funny you mentioned that because the other day I was pouring through Google Maps just because I don't know. Sometimes I like looking at maps, but
it's on Google Maps.
Well, I mean, I know Hobbiton is for sure. But randomly, I wanted to look up Edoras. Like the
hill where Theoden lives.
Yeah, exactly. And sure enough, it's a location you can search up on Google Maps, but it's just this plain old mountain that's nestled right against like the enormous snow-capped mountain range in New Zealand. It's really interesting.
Wow, that's pretty.
They built so many crazy sets and just
no kidding,
did so much that just made this whole world feel so big and gorgeous and real, and it just makes such a big difference. I love it.
And it's funny too as you watch it. The effects they built any VFX shots they did, which they had them, but their VFX was built on like Windows 98 and 99, like old computers. The fact that they even made it to where it looks so good, like a big achievement. The only one that I can think of that I just didn't particularly love was when Legolas is swinging around the elephant. That was the only like CGI shot that I was like, what the?
I mean, there are other ones that have aged for sure.
You can notice it. That's definitely one of the things that would be considered flaws about the movies, is that the CGI is definitely a bit dated in places. You can see little bits and pieces. It's like, if you're looking for it, especially, like Legolas jumping off of the troll in Moria. Like, you could easily, you can see the outline around him as he's falling down. The blur effect that they do.
But I mean, that's minor.
Oh, extremely minor.
It's really minor. And that's the only one out of all of them that really is just like, all right, relax.
Other than that, 4 years of prep time for the movie. It was 4 years, right?
It was a very long pre-production, that's for sure.
It shows.
I mean, you can tell that, like, I'm not exaggerating, like literally every single frame, you can tell that they sat down and were like, okay, we're reading this page from the book, because yes, it is one book that's just split into 3 parts, just like this movie is. But yeah, like, you can tell that, Peter Jackson and his writing team, they looked at these pages in the book and the way that Tolkien described everything, then they pulled all the concept art, and then they just imagined every single frame. I know that's what storyboarding is, but like, you really feel that they took advantage of that opportunity to create frames that really just stick into your head. Every single time you go into a new scene, even if it's the extended edition, it's like, yeah, I remember this shot, and I remember how cool it is, and I remember how much it adds to the effect of the movie,
I haven't read all the books. I've read Fellowship of the Ring, and I can definitely remember reading portions of the book that they yanked from the book and put into the script, which I appreciate. And I also, I'll ask, maybe I have a couple questions I'll ask later, but I think it's interesting that they've yanked it from the book. You feel like they actually sat down, like you were saying, and thought about what was in the book and made it match what was coming out of the camera. And I think that their pre-production time paid off to where, I mean, the movies stand out. And anybody who watches them is like, yeah, I'll sit down and watch Lord of the Rings with you. Maybe not the full extended editions, but...
That's like one of my preliminary questions when someone invites me to watch the Lord of the Rings. I'm always like, is it the extended versions? No. Well, then we're not really watching the Lord of the Rings now.
It's missing so much. And when you're talking about, 45 minutes in Fellowship, an hour in Two Towers, and an hour and a half in Return of the King of added scenes, it's like, those are entire movies, essentially, that you're missing out on.
Although, to present a counterpoint, there was a video I've watched recently, well, not recently, but like, I've watched it multiple times from Cosmonaut Marcus, Cosmonaut Variety Hour.
I do remember that.
He does make a good point in the sense that, like, there are mixed bag elements to the extended edition, particularly Return to the King, where it's like, the extended edition of that movie, it has, closure to Saruman and Grima's character arcs, which you don't get in the theatrical version.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the extended edition results in there being less tension, when when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli look to the paths of the dead. At the end of that sequence, you don't know if they were able to convince the ghosts to fight against the armies or not.
Oh.
And that kind of leads the audience in suspense until they actually show up on the Corsair ships. In the extended edition, you're aware of that all the whole time. And so while the battle's going on, you just think, oh, okay, well, eventually they're going to show up.
But we got to have that cool scene with Legolas shooting the bosun on the Corsair ships.
No, I mean, like, I really like it, but I can picture that not working as well for someone who hadn't seen the movie in any form before. I think it works better for someone who had already seen it.
You can make that argument for certain scenes, but I feel like as a whole, it adds so much that you would be really missing out on too much if you deprived yourself of extended.
One way or another, I can't go back to watching those versions. I can only watch the new extended.
Like, it's no original trilogy of Star Wars here that people will argue about which version they prefer.
Oh, man.
Like, there's only the extended version.
It's funny to me that you bring that up, because I feel like with Star Wars, you have clear, in all three of the trilogies, really, you have one movie that's like everybody kind of agrees on that they really like. With these ones, you kind of have to look at it as a whole 1, 2, and 3, like, whole movie, which to me makes it seem like, I don't know, there's just not like division between them. They pick right up where they left off, and they keep on moving with the story, which I think adds to this being such a good continuity and adds to good continuity in the trilogy, but also like makes it so that the movies flow together really well.
Plus, they were filmed right next to each other, so
which I think
over
also,
the course of like a year, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are some like feats, specifically him copying Gollum made me think of Andy Serkis. His mocap for this movie is like the best. I feel like that's the benchmark for other movies. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Especially, there's one shot that I really like when he's trying to catch the fish in the river. You know that one I'm talking about?
It's iconic with him just flopping around.
It's him flopping around, but it's like, I still can't wrap my head around how they did that. It made it look so good. I don't know.
Weta Software and Weta, all of their company productions, was pretty much like inventing a lot of the technology used to make this film. Like their whole, I don't remember what they call it. It was like Legion software or something, where they would multiply the amount of people that were on screen, was proprietary at the time. And they were just pretty much coming up with all this stuff, so like pretty much on the spot, so they could create these scenes and make it look as epic and real as they needed it to.
Well, it's no wonder that every single movie that has come out since then, the best ones for mocap have been by that studio. You think of the reboot Planet of the Apes trilogy, the Avatar films, Tintin even. Peter Jackson produced that one.
And Howard Shore did the music for it.
Yeah, there you go.
I think I did that.
It was John Williams, though, wasn't it?
No.
With it being a Spielberg movie?
I'm pretty sure it was Howard Shore. But I
never watched that one. Is it good?
Yeah, it's good.
Huh.
It's like the actual Indiana Jones 5.
Oh, don't. No.
Another time.
That's not for now. We're talking...
Like and subscribe. Go check that video out.
Oh, we don't need to talk about that one anymore.
But Howard Shore, like with his music...
Goodness.
Oh, man.
It's so funny. Yes. Like, you talk about some of these big names in movie music, like John Williams or Hans Zimmer or some of these other huge names, and then you look at Howard Shore and see what his like filmography, like his discography, and it's like, oh, Mrs. Doubtfire, and like all of these these like just smaller movies, and you're like, how did they think that he was the guy that would do so well for this, and then he just knocks it out of the park.
It's like pops off. Like
the music is
movie.
just... It reminds me of like a guy who wrote Messiah, Handel. Like he was just kind of like an average to above average composer at the time, but then he just kind of had this religious moment where he just wrote Handel's Messiah in a couple of weeks, and it's one of the greatest just parts of all time.
But
yeah, it was just like he just came out of nowhere, and he made one of the best soundtracks, if not the best overall soundtrack of all time.
Yeah, Howard Shore definitely does not get talked about enough. Like, compared to, like, John Williams and Hans Zimmer, like, nobody really takes the time to talk about like Howard Shore and what he did for the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
But then you watch a movie and you're like, wow, the soundtrack's really. Wait, Howard Shore did this? What?
Well, I think a big difference in his music sounding so great is because he really understands the power of leitmotifs.
Yes.
Or just like a quick 2-second or whatever jingle to remind you of a theme.
Man.
It's like
the Ring theme.
The
It's
Ring
only
theme,
like
yes.
3 notes.
Yes.
Dun, 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 dun. They don't even have to say very much. It just goes, and you're like, oh yeah, this is about the ring.
Or
You
the
hear-
Nazgul theme that comes in all the time. And
Or the orc theme.
The orc theme, the Isengard theme.
theme with the chains.
Mhm.
It's like you hear that, you hear, of course, the theme of Rohan.
Oh, yes, the ride
so
of the
good.
Rohirrim.
It's like all these leitmotifs that really they're so integral to the emotional impact of the movie because you're introduced to these themes and the ideas that are present in those themes, especially because images are associated with them. And then eventually when those pay off later, you're like, yes, yes.
Also, kudos to whoever the violin player was. Played the Rohan theme.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Absolutely perfect.
They lit the recording room on fire with how they were playing those strings, man.
Yeah, no
Like-
kidding.
Gondor's theme. Like, you could just go on and just be like, oh, and you can listen to the soundtrack and just perfectly match the scenes up with the songs because they're so integral to one another, like Zach was saying. Like, you can't have the movie without these songs. And you can't have the songs without the movie. Like, they're so interconnected that they just flow so well together.
I really don't think that they could have pulled off. I mean, they might have been able to pull off the same type of movie, but I don't think without the music, I don't think
It
they
would have
had
been lacking something.
they had like the
Mhm.
perfect mesh of talent and actors and composer and music all in like one go. For like a year, they were just on fire and created 3 movies. Nobody's really done anything besides Lord of the Rings. Besides maybe like
Well, I would say, like, as far as passion projects go, and this is very much a passion project by everyone involved in the entire nation of New Zealand. They just loved what they were doing and they did their best and they put the time in to make sure it was done correctly. And I think
Mhm.
the only other person that has done that, like it for better or for worse, has been James Cameron with his Avatar movies.
true.
Like, those are his passion projects. And while they might not be on the same scale or quality as
Yeah.
the Lord of the Rings movies, like, he has been putting the time and effort into them to do them right. And you brought up Hobbit earlier. That's the perfect example of lacking that passion
Mhm.
because it was so rushed and it was so much corporate meddling and mismanagement.
Yeah, no storyboards.
And
Yeah.
poor Peter Jackson had to come in after Guillermo del Toro left, and it was less than a year of actual pre-production, and so, like, you can see the difference with how so many of these elements that we've talked about with Hobbit and with Lord of the Rings don't mesh as well in Hobbit. Like when they have Thorin Oakenshield walking out to the Nazgul theme.
What?
No, yeah. I
And-
remember hearing
and-
that when I saw the original movie.
In the first
Yeah.
Hobbit movie, when he comes out of the fire during the pine cones and stuff, when they're on the cliff top, it plays the Nazgul theme as he's walking out.
What the freak?
Which, it's epic music, it sounds cool, but it's obviously
a bad guy.
Yeah, it's the
bad
wrong
guy
thing.
it's
Yeah.
obviously not what was supposed to go there, but they just didn't have the time to do it right.
Huh.
And that wasn't the case with Lord of the Rings. Everything was done the way it should have been. Even stuff that they changed from the books. Like, they did take consideration of the changes they were making so that it would try to at least fit the emotion and the tone of the story as well as possible.
So I have a question about adaptations. Obviously, when they made these movies, Tolkien was long passed away, but I feel like they did a pretty faithful adaptation to the book, right?
Mhm.
It depends on how anal you are about the kind of lore, because a lot of the most hardcore Tolkien fans would disagree with you because of the stuff that they cut.
Okay.
Especially the ending of the third movie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or the fact that they got rid of the Barrow Downs, or the
Tom
how-
Bombadil.
I miss Tom.
No one
Bombadil.
cares about Tom Bombadil.
I do. I like him.
the crazy leprechaun that sings about how his smoking hot wife lives with him all day. We don't need that.
Listen, my comparison is. Do you guys remember when Percy Jackson? No, listen.
Terrible adaptation.
Listen, I'm saying contrast that to Percy Jackson, where if you look at Percy Jackson, the guy who wrote the book was so upset with the way that they were doing the movie that, I mean, they also had a pretty good casting to the movie, and, I mean, obviously the movie's not good, but, or the movies, because I think they made the second one, and then they cut it off at that point.
Yeah. I heard that the new Disney Plus one is actually pretty good.
So,
even though the casting's less faithful than the original,
well,
but he likes it more. So
you could argue casting with this, but contrast that also with the second outing of Percy Jackson, where the actual writer Rick, however you say
Rick Riordan,
is involved with the actual, he's producing it, so he's directly involved with making sure the book and stuff is well adapted. I was thinking about that as I was watching the movie. I was like, where do adaptations of books go wrong? Because The Lord of the Rings, obviously...
Everywhere, apparently. Everywhere except for Lord of the Rings.
Knocked it out of the park, to me. They may have cut or changed some things, but it was done faithfully enough that the movies are really good. Yeah. So I'm just curious where adaptations... Because you could argue with Harry Potter, too,
I would argue that if you're going to do an adaptation of anything, whether it be history or books or whatever, you either need to match it faithfully or you need to make changes that will make it run more smoothly for a 2-hour, 3-hour runtime, like what they would have to do for Lord of the Rings. And so I was talking about this with Zach when we went and saw the Napoleon movie.
I was actually thinking about that, yeah.
Because...
Oh, you guys went and saw that?
Oh, it was terrible. But it was... it wasn't historically accurate, which is fine, because it's Ridley Scott. You don't expect historical accuracy from him. But at least you would expect him to make it epic and interesting for a 2-hour runtime. So if it's not doing either of those things, it's a terrible adaptation. Like Artemis Fowl, Percy Jackson, Aragon, Wheel of Time series, all of these
Chronicles,
all of these things, which they're either not adapting it correctly or they're not making it better for a movie, and so they're just you have to do both of those, which I feel that Lord of the Rings did because it was a passion project, and that's where something like Percy Jackson failed. They made some things accurate, but then they just said screw that to the rest of the things. It killed off one of the main characters from the entire series at the end of the first movie.
I think another, it depends how the last one turns out, but I think another comparable adaptation is the Dune movies. Those are, I don't know, to me, those have been very faithful and respectable to Frank Hubert's original work on those novels.
Which, yeah, it feels like a passion project. Villeneuve is, if he is nothing if not passionate about what he does. Blade Runner 2049 was
it's better than the original.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
That is a hot take.
Honestly, not as hot as you think.
I mean, I like it more, but I'm just saying. But he was so in love with the original that he made 2049 to just match the tone, match all of these different elements of the original.
Wow.
That even though it wasn't a written adaptation, it was you can tell the spirit is there. The love is there. With Dune.
And I think another important thing with that too is it's not just love of the material. I mean, that's definitely important for sure. We can talk for hours about various projects that have been made without love or even appreciation for the source material, but it's understanding the medium in which you're adapting it to. Take video games being adapted into movies or shows.
Well, my heart still hurts from the Uncharted movie. Those are one of my favorite games, and that movie...
Oh, boy.
Ugh.
Well, that's the thing. You look at the Uncharted movie, which we have talked about on this channel,
like and subscribe and go check it out.
Exactly.
Shameless plug.
Come here for all shameless plugs, but those games were already were taking a lot of their influence from movies to begin with. And so to make an Uncharted movie that doesn't really match up with the the very dynamic and cinematic quality of the games is just kind of like an ironic misfire.
It's like a slap in the face, really.
Right. And then you look at Lord of the Rings, where, yeah, it really does feel like these images that you could conjure up in your head reading the words on the page are there on the screen. But to Jared's point, like, Peter Jackson and his writing team were very smart to pick certain things from the books and order them in the way they did. Because even though I haven't read the book myself fully, like, I do know that, the Two Towers and Return of the King in particular, elements from both of those stories are presented in a different order in Tolkien's material than in the movies, but it's ordered in the movie in such a way to where it does make sense chronologically and, just in a sequential order of events,
And necessary for a movie medium.
Yes.
Like, even though Christopher Tolkien was not a fan of it because of how much action it had, a lot of this action really added to the intensity and to the appeal of the movie, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, something like the Battle of Pelennor Fields, which is this big epic thing with the Ride of the Rohirrim and with the Oliphaunts and all of this thing that's going down, it's a paragraph in the book. It's like literally less than half a page.
Really?
The entire battle scene, which is
That's interesting.
30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes in the movie.
It's at least 30 minutes.
And it's like less than a paragraph. And so it's like, yes, it's a different thing. It's different medium, but you have to reflect that. And I think they did a wonderful job with that.
Yeah, they made it worthwhile for sure.
And I think another important aspect of that too, the matter of like the action upsetting Christopher Tolkien, I definitely understand his perspective as well. But I also do think that they understood J.R.R. Tolkien's intent with these books to show the horrific ramifications of war.
Yep.
I think all of us here know, and probably some of the people listening to this as well, that Tolkien was very deeply impacted by World War One. His experiences fighting in the trenches
of the Somme.
Which I can't even imagine that, man.
Nope.
And of course, seeing what World War II did to his homeland, you try to think about how that affects, like, what he wrote with the Shire and the scouring of it, and then just the stuff with Fangorn too. Just all these things, it translates into the movie as well. And even though the action is certainly exciting and fun, and you have all the little quips from
Gimli and
Legolas, and even
still only counts as one.
But like, yeah, that stuff to help the movie, but at the same time, the movie recognizes how terrible it is and the weight of loss. I think of the scene after the Battle of Pelennor Fields where they're just kind of scouring all the bodies to try to round up the dead and wounded and all that stuff.
Find who's still alive. And
think about how heart-wrenching it is when Éomer thinks that Éowyn is dead.
And he is screaming. Good old Carl Urban. He is just wailing his heart out in that scene. I love it.
Billy Butcher.
Jeez.
Dread.
Oh yeah, he was Dread,
isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's Bones in Star Trek. He's Dread. Like
he's awesome.
He is the nerd, the hero nerd.
I really like him in Star Trek. Actually, his character was so good.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely pushed the PG-13 limit a few times. Like when they released the Prisoners of Gondor.
Yeah.
By catapulting the decapitated heads into the city.
Good grief.
That's first.
Okay, now I have to ask, because I knew this was going to come up at some point. How old were all of you when you watched these?
This was actually something I was going to bring up too. I was... Okay, so it came out 2001 to 2003. I was like 8 to 10 years old, and I love my parents. They're great. But I had those parents who wouldn't let me watch PG-13 movies unless I was 13 years old. So for the longest time in my life, what felt like a decade, I was stuck watching the 1987 cartoon live-action hybrid version of the Walking Things. Yeah, but I think it was a year later when the extended versions came out, 2004. My aunts, uncles, and parents threw a New Year's Eve watch party of the Return of the King extended version, and they let me in on that. So like watching that third movie in its extended entirety was my very first Lord of the Rings experience, and my life was changed ever since. Like,
I actually think I was a little late to this. Now that I think about it, I think it was when I was 18 that I watched these movies all the way through
oh,
for
dang,
the
really?
first time. Yeah, I just never watched. We never owned them as when I was growing up, so I never watched them. And then one of my friends was like, "We should watch these," and I was like, I've never seen those. We should watch them." And obviously, I'm like, "Oh boy, these are awesome!"
Right.
And then also being able to look up like stories behind the scenes of where I thought I was cool. Hey, did you know that Aragorn kicked the brother's foot like
He deflected the sword.
he deflected the sword? This thing. I thought it was really cool, and then everybody I share with, yeah, I knew that already. I was like, oh, all right.
John Rhys Davies, his makeup he was allergic to it, so he couldn't see, so he hit all of the stuntmen every single take.
Also, I didn't realize the time that I watched, but today I realized he voices Treebeard. Did you guys know that?
I actually didn't realize that till the other day either, no.
Who does?
John Rhys Davies, who's Gimli, voices Treebeard.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Poor production, couldn't afford another actor.
All right, come on.
We're gonna make the Cars joke, the Pixar joke.
What kind of cut rate production is this? I don't know that I would say that. I actually really liked him. I was like, oh wow, he's distinctive enough that I didn't know that he was Gimli and Treebeard for a long time until today. Anyway,
What about you, Jared?
I was actually a bit older. I mean, I went and saw one of the movies with my family in theaters, and I was about 10, 11, 12, that area. But I thought it was so boring because I was fresh out of like prequel movies, Star Wars, where it is a lot more action.
oh yeah.
And a lot more constant action. And so I didn't really care for something that was so slow with lots of talking and
With a 3-hour runtime, too.
and Return of the King was 3 hours, but the other ones were shorter, and so I was just bored. And so it wasn't until years later, that I got the extended edition. I was like, wait, this is really good. I like this. And then I defined my entire life around fantasy and science fiction, so yeah.
There you go.
Thanks, Lord of the Rings. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'll say Star Wars was my gateway drug, but there are a couple like fantasy movies that I pull from a lot, and I think Lord of the Rings is the one that I pulled from more than any other one about fantasy stuff. That and the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah. The Legend of Zelda is my other fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh
pick.
yeah,
Same.
I mean Legend
Yeah.
of Zelda, yeah, but
Can't wait for that movie.
Ugh. It's a topic for another day, man.
I will be okay with it if they don't mess it up, and there's a small chance.
So if it's a loving adaptation like Lord of the Rings,
Yes, it will be good.
Yeah. Which I think the director is on board with doing, too.
Who's the director?
Hunger Games guy.
No, it's the guy.
No, not Hunger
Maze
Games.
Runner.
Maze Runner.
Yeah.
Which is just
Well,
Hunger Games light.
But he also made the Planet of the Apes movie that's coming out in a few months.
Yeah.
Is that good or bad?
I mean, I really liked their most
We'll
recent
find
ones.
out. Find out in a couple months.
We'll know in a couple months. Well, that's another adaptation that they have to get right. It's funny though that we have Last of Us, where Last of Us was like I really liked the first game of Last of Us, and Last of Us was a pretty good show. They did change some things and add some things, but I didn't feel like what they added was detrimental to the story.
In some cases, it actually made it better. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it goes back to the point Jared made. If you're going to do an adaptation, it still has to be able to. It's either got to make it more epic, or it's got to be a faithful adaptation. I think they hit the nail on the head with Last of Us, along with Lord of the Rings.
You know, after you guys gave all your answers about, when you first experienced these, I'm kind of shocked that I was actually like the youngest to watch these.
Really?
Because okay, so my mom in particular, she grew up reading these books.
Oh.
And so she was already like a built-in fan of Lord of the Rings. And so when the movies came out, and of course my brother and my sister, they were like perfect prime age to watch these in theaters. Like my brother was in high school, my sister was in junior high going into high school at that time. And so they were huge into them. They bought them on DVD, both the theatricals and the extendeds. And so growing up, when I was like 7 or 8, my parents were also kind of the same as you, Aaron, in the sense that they didn't really want me to watch PG-13 movies at a super young age, but at the same time, they're like,
it's Lord of the Rings.
is different. It's just orcs. So pretty much like
no,
my first
one cares if they're getting beheaded. We're not human.
The Uruk-hai from the first one getting his head chopped off. Oh, jeez.
But like, I mean, really though, like, so it was pretty much Lord of the Rings and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man that were my first PG-13 movies.
Oh yeah.
And even then, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was kind of like pushing it because my dad was like, "Yeah, look away when he gets impaled by the glider and stuff." But with these movies,
look away, child.
Away. Ugh. And so watching like Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers, I already was actually really engaged by the story because maybe I didn't understand it all, but I was really fascinated by just all of the imagery, the lore, and the fact that it kind of had like a spooky vibe to it, which I don't know, I've always kind of had like an affinity for spooky things. And then of course, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the orcs getting their heads chopped off. I'm like, wow, this is cool. So ultimately, like, I actually was a big fan of these movies by the time Return of the King came out, and then, yeah, my dad took me to see Return of the King at Fiesta 5.
Nice. So here's the next question: of all of the multimedia surrounding the movies, what is your favorite?
I mean, just these movies, really.
No, like. Okay, let me phrase my question.
What other Lord of the Rings properties? Or...
No. Like games. Like, what's your favorite Lord of the Rings game?
Does it have to be accurate to the lore or not?
That's what I was gonna do. That was my point.
Because if you're talking accuracies, Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor don't have very many, but they are very fun games and very good games.
Very good orc killing simulators, I'll say that.
You get to chop off lots of heads. Zach loves that stuff. Battle for Middle-earth was a great strategy game.
Oh yeah, that's the one I was thinking about.
The movie tie-in games were actually legendary back in the day.
Return of the King is still
Two
the
Towers
best.
and
Justin and I played many hours of that.
even the Game Boy version of Two Towers was literally just Diablo 1 put onto the Game Boy.
Really?
With Lord of the Rings characters.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it was actually really legit.
The Return of the King.
But the Gollum game is the one that really stuck out to me as being the best of all.
So
this year was just the biggest for.
My comment is twofold, threefold actually, because I have 3 points to make. One is I think that the
Let's try to finish tonight.
Listen, I'm quick and succinct about it.
No, you're not.
The Return of the King video game, I think, is the best movie tie-in game ever made. That game was awesome, and I spent hours playing that game. It was conveniently with Zach.
Kung Fu Panda's better.
Do you guys remember before they died off, Pandemic made like a Battlefront version of
Quest?
Yeah. I remember being so excited for that game, but then like it came out and like it was like really easy to cheese and
it wasn't that it was rushed.
No, yeah. Not that good.
And because of the licensing issues, it's now in purgatory, along with Battle for Middle-earth and a few others. You can't access them legally. But yeah, if you have an emulator.
Yeah.
Or if you just have like the physical games.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who does that?
So
cool people.
Yeah, sure thing, Grandpa.
Watching these movies, and knowing what happens in Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a big portion of that game that affects a little bit of the movies where I was just like,
You're like, what the?
I didn't know Shelob was a hot woman this entire time.
Well, yeah, there's that, but that's not even what I'm referring to.
I like her a lot more now.
Yeah, that's only one small part of my gripe. Anyway, that's not the point. When you eventually finish Shadow of War, then we can talk about why I'm... Anyway.
Well, I have to start it first.
Yeah.
And now your comment's not making me want to.
No, you still should play it.
Galadriel sends assassins out. It is cool. It is
really.
It's worthwhile.
It's a good game to play through, but there are a couple of lore things in that game where you're just like, oh my god.
Well, the worst aspect of Shadow of Mordor was the story. Like, there basically wasn't one. So,
well,
it was an excuse to be Batman with a sword.
Batman
right?
with a sword.
I mean, yeah, it was just the Arkham games, but you're You're basically like Aragorn meshed with a wraith. Anyway, we're getting off topic here.
But I was also gonna say, WV fumbling the bag so badly, and like Gollum is the perfect way, because that game I haven't even touched it, and just looking at it, I'm like, oh my, who thought that was a good idea to greenlight? And I feel like everybody involved in Lord of the Rings is just like, what are we doing here? We made such a great movie, and you guys have just crapped on.
What, you didn't play the Lord of the Rings MOBA?
No.
That was great. They've been crapping on it for years now, my friend. Lord of the Rings MOBA, the mobile phone. Ever since Christopher Tolkien died and the rest of the stuff went to the estate has not cared quite as much about what happens with it.
They've just crapped on what essentially is what we've said, the best movie trilogy ever made. They've just crapped on the legacy of this trilogy.
Yeah, it's hard to find really good spin-off content.
You could say the same about Harry Potter. Really, WB themselves are just fumbling right now.
But hey, at least we have Rings of Power to go and watch.
Let's not, okay?
Listen.
I keep my Amazon Prime membership for the shipping. Not that.
Keep it for Reacher. Reacher's really good.
Alright, now we're going to start shilling for other shows on this.
It actually is really good.
Well, I'm sure there are a lot more things that could be said about this trilogy. I could talk about it for hours, but probably should wrap it up, for the viewers' sake. But any last comments that you guys want to add in?
I love it.
Yeah, I like it too.
Like, it's not perfect. There's stuff that on this most recent rewatch that I was noting with a more critical mindset, like some of the CGI stuff, a couple of weird humor moments with Pippin, especially, that just don't fit the mood, and just some other things. But for the most part, this is just as close to a movie that I love, a 10 out of 10 for me, as you can possibly get.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I'm right there with you. One last thing that I'll say is that one of the reasons why this trilogy has been so great for me, like ever since I started watching them, is because I drew the profound lesson from it that like great things can be accomplished by very small people, like literally and figuratively, like whether it's Frodo trying to make this really big exodus to throw a very temptatious ring into a very big volcano, and like plenty of other examples in this trilogy. Like the message just comes across in so many ways, and like if any film or if any book or any other piece of media wants to be great, like it'll allow its audience to draw that strength from it, just exactly what this set of films does.
Yep.
It's a positive movie. Like all of the character interactions, all of the different, like it supports good in a way that is very clear from the very beginning. Like with the concerning Hobbit section and all of the fellowship and how they interact with one another with love and kindness and gentleness. They're not like jerks to each other, even if they make a couple of quips. It's just like
Boromir.
No, he is a good person, and like he is one of the biggest tragedies of the entire story.
That is true.
In a good way.
In a good way, and I love his story. I love Boromir. Like what he was saying, it ennobles the people that watch it.
I would have followed you, my brother.
My captain. My
king.
You have my sword.
You have my bow.
Not this day.
Oh, dude, the war speeches before they start going, like Theoden's one is really good. Also, Aragorn's before they storm. Also,
Treebeards.
Yeah. Yes.
My business is
one of the best.
There's a rockin' stone.
There's two like extended scenes that I always remember and always am like a big fan of. When Aragorn rides up and chops the
mouth of Sauron's head off.
It's amazing. Also, that guy needed to see a dentist.
They're all British, so there's no dentist anywhere to be found.
Yeah.
They all just smoke weed, have bad teeth, and don't wear any shoes.
And eat lots of salted pork.
Yeah.
Dude, it was funny. I was like, man, they are smoking weed in the show. It never clicked for me before.
It's more like tobacco.
No, I know, but
We all know that Merry Pippin just gets stupid high off that stuff.
So did Gandalf.
so did Gandalf. And it's funny because Saruman, the halflings, what does he say? The halflings.
Your love of the halfling's leaf has slowed your mind.
Yeah, slowed your mind. I was like, Gandalf got high with the hobbits.
He's been doing it for the last 51 years.
Hilarious. Peak comedy in that movie. So I was like, there's no way that they just outed Gandalf as a weed smoker. It's really funny.
Tobacco, not weed.
It was really funny.
Long bottom leaf, some special stuff, man.
You wouldn't understand, you non-pipe smokers.
Yeah, right. Because you smoke a bunch of pipe.
I've been to England.
Well,
Didn't he?
yeah, I guess my closing comment would be, I mean, pretty similar to what you guys have already said, but I was thinking recently after I played something that is far removed from what Lord of the Rings is, but, you know, I finished Alan Wake 2 the other day, and
Here we go.
Yeah.
there are things about that game that I don't like just straight up, you know, and I could talk about them in another video, but when I think about that whole experience and just what it was and how it pushed boundaries and just like how it all came together as one unique, awesome vision, it's like suddenly those flaws don't really matter as much, and I can ignore them just because of how cool the overall experience was. That's how I feel about the Lord of the Rings. You know, like this whole trilogy, like Jared said, has those problems that you can pinpoint and nitpick and kind of like a CinemaSins way. But this trilogy is just a labor of love, one that just flows together so beautifully and has those amazing messages, just incredible payoffs, and it's just, you can't really get a better just movie, like capital M movie experience out of anything other than these three movies, bar none.
Agreed.
True.
I
I could do that.
I'm with you.
Gondor calls for aid.
Dude, also that moment when he's like, and Rohan will answer, is so awesome. It's like,
I love these movies. Tolkien was a wordsmith. He was good at writing. Believe it or not.
And they were wise to just pluck words right out of his book and just put them straight in there.
They were also wise to not include, like...
The fight against Sauron at the very end?
No. Not
Oh,
that.
right. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No.
Good job, Peter Jackson, for neglecting that temptation.
No. I think it was a smart decision on their part to not include, like, songs. Besides the one that Gandalf sings.
Bull crap. Songs are the best part of the books.
I'm looking at you, Hobbit, where it's not.
Did you like the troll song? It's great.
No, the one where they're throwing the plates to each other in Bilbo's house.
That one's great too.
That's fun.
That establishes their characters so well. But like, there's songs, so many songs in the books that are so good. The Lament for Boromir song is so just like
I love
tender
the
and-
Hobbit book. I don't mind the songs in the Hobbit book. The Hobbit movie is just.
I think we need to stop this video before Justin before he picks a fight with me.
Alrighty.
About the Hobbit movie?
About the songs in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go all Gollum on you.
You gonna choke me out?
I'm gonna grab you like a fish and just bite into you.
Yeah,
Yikes.
because Justin's so juicy sweet.
Yep. My son's sweet, juicy sweet.
Well, thank you all for joining me here this evening to talk about these movies. For anyone who's been listening, you know, thanks for sticking around with us bums for so long. But if you enjoyed this, and of course want to look forward to any other videos that are produced, whether they are ones like this or actual, you know, edited, scripted videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel, like this video, you know, comment with your thoughts on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And yeah, thanks for listening, and may the blessings of all of Elvendom be with you, I guess.
Yep. Not idly do the leaves of Lorien fall. Let's go.
Farewell,
Bye.
hobbits of the Shire.
May the force be with you.